3 o'clock, the meeting of the Ojai Basin Groundwater Management Agency. We'll stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, we do the roll call.
Peter Thielke,
Here.
Director Wyrick,
I'm here.
Director Daddy,
Here.
Director Finch,
Here.
and Chair Hages.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item is director announcements. Peter.
Nothing to report from the mutuals.
Jim.
Nothing to report from OCD,
Bill.
OWCD.
Ongoing back and forth with the mediator, but, you know, there's intense activity going on in that regard.
Bob.
Nothing for the community water district.
And just ditto what Bill said. General manager comments.
Just a couple things, and I'll see if Mr. Candy can want to address this maybe the next meeting. There was a Senate bill the governor signed into law, SB 1100, and it modifies the open meeting laws that provides guidelines for the orderly conduct of meetings. And so essentially it gives you some guidance on how you can eject people from meetings if they're creating problems. And so I'll leave it at that, but I think it's I think it's interesting, and the board should be aware of it. So if you ever have an issue, handle it appropriately. The second thing, I won't get into details, too much detail, but I've had a medical condition crop up in 2015. I had prostate cancer, and I had the prostate removed. And since that time, I've been getting a series of PSA testing. And all of a sudden now those tests are starting to rise. Not significant, but based on the doctors that I've talked to, I'm gonna have to start a hormone therapy and external beam radiation therapy. And that radiation therapy is for 6 weeks, 5 days a week. It's only about a minute to 5 minutes at a time, but it takes a half an hour to get set up to do it all. So it's gonna be probably 2 hours out of my life every day for the next. But I'm not exactly sure when it's going to happen, because I have, right now I have an appointment on the September 14th to just kind of get set up. If they don't start it till after that, it's going to impact my trip to Australia. And so getting the hormone shot, that kind of puts any aggressive cancer approach at bay. And they didn't say it's aggressive, but so I'm going to try and hold my radiation therapy off until after I get back. The only reason I bring this up, I don't care what people know about me, but the fact is, later on in the radiation process, I could be impacted. There are side effects, and so I don't know what my ability is going to be to support the agency later on through that process. But I just wanted to make the board aware of it, and I'll keep everybody up to date and let you know what's going on. But just something you should be aware of.
Yeah, thanks,
That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Wish you the best of luck with
Yeah,
that.
Thanks.
best wishes on that.
Thanks.
They know so much more about how to do that well today than they used to.
If I don't take care of it, then
Yeah.
I probably won't be around too long. But at least it's not an aggressive point. When I had the prostate surgery, they caught it early, and the doctor says they're catching this early, so there should be no problem with full recovery.
Oh, good. Anything else, John?
No, that's it. That's it.
Okay, the next item, Jordan Basin Status Report.
Thank you. Today, as we talk about the basin status conditions, title this presentation Dry and Drier. As you can imagine, this is something that is pretty typical for this time of year to have it so dry here, despite how much we're hearing about so much precipitation in a lot of the typically arid Southwest and the South. and other parts of the continent. We're seeing a lot of things in the news about how it's going to be a wetter winter here and drier winter there, and we'll get what we get, and we'll see what happens. But in this case, we're talking dry and drier because we had such a dry 2021-22 water year. No significant rain since the last report, 14.9 inches on valley floor, 22.87 on the Nordhoff Ridge. This is about 2/3 of the long-term average. What that does to the main aquifers of the basin, here's the hydrograph from the Key Well area. As of 8/22/22, the other day, the depth to water there was 185.39 feet. We're at about 62% capacity, 49,600 acre feet as the estimate. Still above last year's nadir, which is good. We still have a ways to go, at least 3 feet. And I've said this for the past couple months, but by next month we'll probably be there. Things have kind of slowed down a little bit in the receding limb of this hydrograph. What that means in the bigger picture, the stratified aquifers of the basin, I think the key thing to note on this graph is that there's still a good discrepancy between the elevation of the Key Well area in the central portion of the main basin and the points of daylighting of groundwater from the southwestern uppermost saturated zone that feeds San Antonio Creek. The flow rates in the creek have been relatively consistently low for a few months now, and the elevation of that daylighting is pretty consistently right around where it is, around that 640-foot level. That is still a good 50 feet plus lower elevation than the main aquifer in the central portion of the basin. And that's something that you would expect there'd be a lot more flow than that 100th of a CFS if there was that 50 feet of drawdown between those two. So again, further evidence that's continuing of that separation. Speaking of the basin outflow, we need to change our graph, or our table here, because we've been doing this since 2019, that July, with this level of monthly manual measurements. And these are, of course, just snapshots. But as you can see at the very bottom of this table on the 22nd, we had dry conditions out of Montgomery Creek underneath Creek Road. And at the flow measurement point, at the exit point of the basin, we're at 1/100th of a CFS. So that's all of about 5 gallons per minute. But that's still about 7,200 gallons per day that's flowing down there. And that's just in the surface. And I think that's important to note that distinction today, because for the first time, we've had to modify our flow measurement methods. Once upon a time, we were able to just set our transect across, as you see here in this image, and measure the flow that was going underneath that with the impeller. Over time, that gets a little bit drier, as you can see here, and drier. However, this month, we had to create somewhat of a weir where we can measure the flow with some degree of accuracy.
High
This is-
engineering there.
Absolutely. It's something that's commonly done, and it's probably been done for, well, centuries, at least since the sawmill was invented and we were able to make boards like this to put sluices in and pan for gold. Of course, not here. What you'll notice in this image is that, of course, we're directing all the flow to this little narrow channel for our measurement. But more importantly, if you look closely at the very bottom, you see gravel at the bottom of that flow channel. There's not bedrock exposed there, as we've seen in previous years, where you can see the bedrock on the side to the right of that tall reed, dipping off to the south. But when that gravel is fully culled out, you actually see the incised channel of bedrock at this creek point. So for next month, what we're probably going to do is dig around some of that gravel and expose, effectively manually cull that gravel out, and then check the flow right on top of the bedrock. So what that means for this month's measurement is that we have a relatively limited amount of surface flow, but there's still a little trickle of water flowing through the gravels that we're measuring on top of. You follow that? Make sense?
Doesn't at some point it just become not measurable and like probably at this point? I mean, it looks to me like it's gravel at the end of the weir.
Yeah, that's part of an optical illusion, I think, of the reflection of the sun or the light coming through the center portion of this photograph. So it looks a little bit wetter where it's reflecting that light, but it is certainly is water flowing over that portion. Something else that I wanted to bring up on that southwestern uppermost saturated zone is we've mentioned and we've been in coordination with Ojai Valley Sanitary District to monitor these some of these perched aquifer wells, these shallowest wells that the sewer systems are correlated to. And of course, we're monitoring the South Fulton Street with accuracy, but that well 6 over on the far westernmost side of the basin, 10 up near Signal Street in the park that's being put up there, rain garden, up near Sarzati Park, and up just to the north of that. And I bring this up today because I wanted to, if you haven't seen these are the loggers that we have in some of these wells. And these are the actual ones that are programmed and running as we speak. So right now they're going to be measuring my temperature of about close to 100 degrees, not feverish, but 97. I can pass these around to the board just so you can see and take a look at these things. They're a bit newer version of what we've had for years in the basin. These ones actually carry that pressure was monitored, by the way, if you dropped it.
There we go.
The
daddy event.
There you go.
So you can see what these look like. These actually can carry on board 150,000 data points of water level and temperature. So we can leave these in literally for years, monitoring every 90 minutes as we've programmed them. So over the course of the next decade, we'll be able to download these periodically, like we do the other wells in the basin, and put them into the knowledge set and database that we can share with everyone. So that's it for the dry and drier portion. We're looking forward to continuing this, and we'll talk on later agenda items.
Anyone have any questions on that? Have you noticed whether or not there's still any pools at Camp Comfort right across from the picnic area there? Usually those pools will.
Yeah, I haven't checked, but I do believe they exist there because that's one of the places where you can see San Antonio Creek flowing right over bedrock. Very little, if any, alluvium in that Camp Comfort area, especially just underneath the big overhangs that are over there. And so you can hike over there and you can see Vaqueros Formation and Rincon shales that are exposed in the creek bottom with little to no gravel. So we're almost hoping to mimic that condition for next month's measurement at the outflow point of the Ojai Basin.
Okay.
Jared, is there like a maintenance schedule where you have to, see the hook on these to pull them up to make sure these holes aren't plugged with something?
Yes, so this is actually a hole that just hangs in the well. So
Yeah.
we'll tie a string or
Yeah.
cable or wire to this. This you can actually
Oh, okay.
unscrew, and you can see what that interface is. It's actually an optical interface that takes a light signal from the onboard data logging device. And we can either put this into a telemetric system, we can put it into a Bluetooth system, we can download it directly onto phones, computers, tablets,
Okay.
you name it. And
I'm talking about the holes at the bottom. Do they,
Yeah, the
do
holes
they
at the
get plugged
bottom.
up or you have to make sure they're
Yeah,
clear?
they can, and from time to time, you want to make sure that you can see daylight through
Yeah.
the holes on the opposite ends of the cylinder.
So you have to pull them up every once in a while and make sure.
When you pull them up to download the data, we always check on that and clear it out. Occasionally, we'll set it in some Coca-Cola and dissolve away any amount of the scale that may have precipitated. And if you can't find Coca-Cola, Taco Bell hot sauce works pretty well too.
Okay, Jordan,
Does
you want
anybody
to
in
go?
the audience want to take a look at these just for kicks?
Any questions or comments?
I'm just curious what the data is that you are most interested in collecting.
So from these actual loggers, the intent will be for us to to see how the water levels within the southwest uppermost saturated zone change over time, and how that correlates to the flow in San Antonio Creek, the water stages in San Antonio Creek, and how it contrasts to the aquifers at depth within the basin. So it's a way to just continue collecting data and being able to compare a high-frequency, long-term record.
And are those specific wells selected for a certain reason?
Yes, so the OVSD has a network of a dozen or so of those wells, and those are ones we selected based on their location and accessibility.
So are they specifically deep wells?
They're all about 20 feet or shallower.
They're all shallow wells?
Yeah, and these wells were put in so that OVSD could monitor the water levels in that little aquifer right next to the sewer lines. Because once upon a time, the sewer lines leaked in water when the groundwater was high, and the secret sauce leaked out of the sewer lines into the perched system there, which neither of which really help us very much. So what they've done is they've gone through the lining process and replacement of a lot of that, a lot of those sewer lines over time, but they've left these wells for us, which are significantly valuable. If we were trying to drill these today, the infrastructure investment, it could be a six-figure project to get those, that number of wells in place. And it's just a usable thing that we've agreed with OVSD to get through.
And so it is picking up nutrient information as well?
These ones record only temperature and water level. The nutrients, not so much, other than what is temperature related. So it's something that those can be sampled, and I'm not sure if OVSD actually samples those wells for nutrients. Yeah, good questions.
There's no other public comments. Jordan, you want to go on with the next item?
I think Devin, public comments, right? Or,
Oh, yes.
the nested monitor, well, you have anything further on that?
And that's part of the discussion we just had regarding the
Yeah, I probably should take that off the agenda
All right.
next time.
systems.
Now we can go to general public comments. These are comments on items that do not appear on today's agenda. Yes?
Hello, everybody. My name is Renee Roth. Many of you know me and are familiar with me. It's nice to see everybody again. I just want you to know I'm running for Ojai City Council, District 3, and I hope to represent the interests of the community as far as problems, questions, how we can work to better understand our water resources, our water supplies, our water conservation measures, and maybe even projects that are forthcoming that might increase our supplies of water so that we can get really good information out to the community about what is happening with our water systems. There seems to be some confusion, misinformation. We don't have any water, we're running out of water. That kind of information out there that I'd really like to be able to address in a positive, factual way so that people know where we're at, and you're an integral part of that information and that messaging. And I'd like to get more information out about your sustainability plan and the amazing things that you're going to have to accomplish within the next few years. So anyway, I just wanted to announce that, and good to see everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, the next item are action items. Update on groundwater sustainability plan activity. John?
Yeah, and Devin, Devin from Dudek's gonna present that today. Trevor, who normally presents, his wife just had a baby girl, so he's off until the 1st of September, so, yeah. Congratulations.
All right. Can everyone see the slides?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Chair Hages and Board. As John mentioned, I'm Devin, a hydrogeologist with DUDEC, and today I'll be discussing the response to comment letter to the State Water Resources Control Board, and then Proposition 68 grant opportunity that's upcoming. So moving right in, first we'll discuss the letter received from the Water Board on the GSP. This letter has been discussed at previous meetings, so I'll be touching on the main points of the letter and also the OBGMA's response. So the 17-page letter from the Water Board received on July 1st primarily focused on the GSP's characterization of interconnected surface waters, the description of the hydrogeologic conceptual model of the basin, evaluation of groundwater dependent ecosystems, and treatment of sustainable management criteria in the GSP. The Water Board makes several recommendations on how the OBGMA should revise the GSP. The main ones being that the use of the Ojai Basin groundwater model or Ventura Rivershed groundwater surface water model could be used to establish sustainable management criteria for interconnected surface waters. Number two, to expand on the discussion of groundwater dependent ecosystems in the basin to incorporate the best available information. To reevaluate the provisional estimate of sustainable yield to incorporate depletion of interconnected surface waters. Expand the discussion regarding the determination that conditions in the basin have been sustainable, and expand discussion of specific triggers for implementation of the projects and management actions, and how the OBGMA will coordinate with other agencies to implement the projects. So very long and thorough letter. In order to address the State Water Board's letter, the OBGMA has prepared a response to comment letter that addresses each of the Water Board's comments individually, and then also communicates OBGMA's stance on the issues brought up by the Water Board, reiterating that really the OBGMA remains committed to filling the known data gaps in the basin and using the best available science to manage the basin sustainably. Specifically, the OBGMA response to comment letter describes in details that currently the accuracy of the model and its ability to represent observed conditions in the basin, in particular the perched aquifer, is not appropriate for developing sustainable management criteria for interconnected surface water. As you can see in the two graphs on the right, these are wells in the basin with measured data that were used in the calibration of the model. And as shown, the model consistently either over predicts or under predicts groundwater level trends at wells in the basin by upwards of 100 feet. So number two, the presence of terrestrial and aquatic habitats that rely on groundwater in the basin is currently a data gap, and that's noted throughout the GSP. And the OBGMA is committed to filling this data gap, but it's not something, the data is not available currently to set minimum thresholds and measurable objectives for interconnected surface water. The OBGMA also notes that future GSP updates will expand on the discussion of the impacts of pumping on beneficial uses and users in the basin as data gaps are filled, and the GSP does do a good job of thoroughly describing the projects and management actions and implementation triggers that will be undertaken as part of GSP implementation. So I think the board has had opportunity to review both letters, and at this time, the next step would be for the letter to be finalized and uploaded to the Sigma portal so that the public and the water board can review the OBGMA's responses. So does the board have any comment and on the letter and responses, any additional revisions or edits, and is the board ready to approve of the letter for submittal to the portal?
This is a letter we reviewed at the last meeting, correct, with the recommended changes?
Yes, correct.
The board have any comments or questions?
This member has a question. The portion about the interconnectability of the perch water with the other agencies, which I think you stated, is that correct? They have a question about the interconnectability between the OBGMA and some of the other areas. It just appears that thing's come back about 3 times, maybe a little bit more, comments from them. Is there some reason they believe that we're interconnected? My understanding is when we got done with our study that we did not have an interconnectability except where the perch water overflows into the Bronca and it flows down to the ocean. That was the only interconnectability we have. So is there another issue there?
I think that in all the comment letters, that has, as you indicated, that has been a focus, and I think the study is ongoing. As we've discussed at previous board meetings, data continues to be collected to tell the story and what is occurring in the basin. And as I'll discuss later in this presentation, there is opportunity to collect additional information and have a more defensive data set to show what is occurring in the basin, to fully understand not only the perch zone and the southwest portion of the basin, but in other areas of the basin. In the GSP, potential groundwater dependent ecosystems exist throughout the basin, and that's something that the agencies are wanting to ensure the basin is managed so that they're not adversely impacted.
Okay, thank you.
Devin, just real quick, it just appears to me, based upon the state board's letter and the other comment letters we received, and especially the model that was used in the Upper Ventura River, there's a lot of assumptions about interconnectability, but that hasn't been proved or disproved at this point. And it seems like people are making assumptions, and I think that their model made that assumption that there is some interconnectability. And so I guess that's why I want to make sure that we keep putting information out there, that while we don't have all the information of yet, we see information that is trending toward definitely a disconnect for the most part through the system between the basin and the perch zone. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, that's a fair statement, and really the opportunity to update the GSP and understanding of the basin comes at the 5-year GSP update. So for now, it's really continuing the monitoring that has taken place, potentially expanding the monitoring, and then once the 5-year GSP update comes around, that information and data can be included for everyone to review.
And I think the main point of interconnection is the San Antonio Creek at the confluence with the Ventura River, and the assumption that pumping the Ojai Basin has a direct impact on surface flows in the San Antonio Creek. And the evidence that we've put together indicates that's probably not true.
Chair, I'd just add to that, if I may. I think it's important just to reiterate the basic precept of scientific method is you posit hypotheses and that can be refuted by data and observational. And what we're doing constantly is to ask, the next item is to expand on the ability to test these hypotheses. And I think the problem is that it's important that the everyone involved, I think, at all levels, accept the discipline of that basic precept of scientific method and not try to drive assumptions outside of that refutable hypothesis and observational data framework. So I think the response in the comment letter stays with that precept, and I'm ready to approve it.
All right, if there's no further comments, we have a motion to approve the response letter.
Second?
Call the roll.
Director Daddy,
Yes.
Director Finch, Director Thielke,
Yes.
Director Wyrick,
Yes.
and Chair Hages.
Yes.
Unanimous. Thank you.
Who made
I think
the,
I did.
who made-
Bill
Bill did.
He jumped on me, you know.
All right, the next item is working draft on the application for Prop 68 grant funds.
Chair Hages, actually, there's some additional presentation to work through. Is going to discuss the proposed projects for the Prop 68 grant, if you all are interested.
Yeah,
Yes.
prior to that, I had met with Devin and Trevor and talked about projects that I thought were certainly suitable to move forward initially through our groundwater sustainability plan implementation. And part of the issue is the grant, the Prop 68 grant, requires a minimum of $1 million. And so trying to find enough projects to do that was a little challenging. So Devin is going to go through that and give you an idea of what we talked about, and certainly we'd appreciate any feedback from the board about if you think something else needs to be done.
Yeah, thank you, John. And in the agenda packet and the board packet, the working draft memorandum that has been put together describes in detail each of the projects that we're going to be discussing today. And so if you've had a chance to review that, it'll help in this presentation. So yeah, next we'll be discussing this Prop 68 grant. The Proposition 68 Round 2 minimum grant amount is $1 million, and maximum grant amount is $20 million, with 10% of total project cost can be allocated towards grant administration, and local cost share is not required, but priority is given to applicants that can provide cost share. Currently, the cost to implement the projects as described in the groundwater sustainability plan is less than the minimum grant amount. So the recommendation is to reevaluate that project list in the GSP and expand the number, scope, and type of projects to include in the grant application, with a focus of addressing some of the data gaps in the basin. So the grant solicitation opens in October of this year and is open for 6 weeks. DWR will post the award list in late spring, early summer of 2023. And then the final executed agreements will be completed in the fall of 2023, with funds available from then until spring of 2025, which provides about 2 years to complete any projects that will be grant funded. Under Prop 68, eligible projects include recharge, recycled water, and conjunctive use projects, groundwater contamination prevention and remediation projects, water reliability, conservation, efficiency, banking, exchange, and reclamation projects, geophysical investigations to identify areas with recharge potential, and lastly, revisions, updates, or modifications to the GSP. So the projects in the GSP fall under these eligible categories. They're shown on the left in the slide here. So in the GSP, there are 6 projects that were identified would be completed in the near term. And they include develop a data management system, prepare a sampling and analysis plan, prepare a groundwater dependent ecosystems assessment, simulate extreme climate scenarios, explore opportunity to implement focused recharge, and develop a comprehensive conjunctive management plan. These are all projects that had been discussed in previous meetings and were included in Chapter 4 of the GSP. So in order to reach that 1 million minimum for eligible grant funds, a few additional projects are being considered, and also expansion of some of the projects in the GSP. This would include expanding the scope of the GDE assessment to include installation of additional stream gauges and riparian piezometers. Would also include revision of the numerical groundwater model to incorporate some of the data that's been collected since the GSP was submitted, including the perch aquifer data and stream flow data. And then lastly, to update the extraction metering program. There's been identified need to ensure all wells are metered and that the basin is accurately being monitored in that regard. So I'm just going to go through each one of the projects and provide a bit more detail similar to what's included in the board packet. So there's 8 projects in total, and starting with the first one, develop a data management system. So the purpose of this project would be to update the existing data management system, to modernize it in a sense so that all monitoring data, groundwater and surface water and climate, other data can be easily accessible by stakeholders, which will improve decision-making in the basin and make the data more readily available to anyone who's interested. The DMS would be set up so that data can be viewed geographically on a map viewer, and then also with the functionality of being able to export the data sets in various formats, including Microsoft Excel and GIS. And maintaining and having a DMS is a requirement of SGMA. So this would certainly benefit the OBGMA and stakeholders and provide some a repository and a more structured database for everything that's being collected, as well as historical data. The estimated cost for this type of data management system with the geographic viewer and all is approximately $55,000. So these costs are very rough order of magnitude at this time. They'll be further refined as part of the grant application if they're included, and will include the cost will be broken down into a capital cost and maintenance costs and labor costs and so forth. So right now, these cost estimates are subject to change. As I go through it, I'll ask the board to give input, and also if you review the agenda packet, it would be helpful to have any input in writing so that these projects can be further refined or edited, eliminated based on what the OBGMA would like to pursue potentially and have funded by grant.
Any comments or questions?
Yes. 2 comments. I would like to point out that our resident expert here, Mr. Keir, has pointed out that a more technically accurate term, perhaps for the perched aquifer, is the, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Keir, the separate southwest separate saturated zone?
We referred to the area of the basin of which you speak as the southwest uppermost saturated zone.
Uppermost, okay.
And the
Swazi
distinction,
for short.
Yeah, the acronym of that would be SWAZI, which is a bit easier to say. And it's something that came to us because the textbook definition of perched aquifer is like the ceramic plate buried in a sandbox.
Right.
And if water is poured on the top of the sandbox over the plate, it goes over that plate until it goes off to the sides, and there's a deeper zone that will be saturated. That is the textbook definition of perched. So as to not to confuse anyone, because nature is much more complicated than the sandbox. And the Ojai Basin in particular has a southwest uppermost saturated zone. Some of it is over a thick clay. Some of it is over a thin clay. And some of it's directly over bedrock. But it all behaves very similarly. So rather than espouse the term perched, we coined the SWAZI, southwestern uppermost saturated zone.
And I just wonder whether we should use the technically accurate term, maybe with perched aquifer in parentheses, just so there's not a sort of a cheap shot of criticism of the proposal. And the second comment I wanted to make was that the collaboration with the Ventura County Watershed Protection District, especially in light of the DWR's focus on re-engineering flood control infrastructure to take advantage of episodic flood control events in terms of recharge potential. Perhaps we could, and I'll submit this in writing, expand the focus just on the San Antonio Creek spreading grounds to other opportunities with the Watershed Council in terms of the flood control infrastructure re-engineering. It would certainly easily get us an expanded scope. So those are my two comments.
Anyone else have any comments? Yeah, I understand that other agencies can participate in this grant with us if they demonstrate they have projects that would be consistent with the GSP goals. So I know Casitas has discussed at least one and maybe several others. So I think it would be a good idea to coordinate with Casitas and with the county and see if we can add those to this list.
Yeah, great points. So, two of the projects included in the list are one is evaluate recharge opportunities in the basin, and the other is develop a comprehensive conjunctive management plan with Casitas. So I think both of those projects potentially the scopes could be expanded and include input from those agencies.
I guess what's important is what's the drop dead date on getting all this formalized so we can submit it in time.
Well, it opens in October. There's potential that deadline may be pushed to January based on some redispersal of funds by the legislature. But I think, input from this board meeting will be incorporated, and next board meeting we can discuss these projects again and try to work towards finalizing the scopes and costs of them to include in the grant application, which we'd like it'd be best to have ready in early October.
Okay. Well, I'll have someone from Casitas contact your office and maybe we can coordinate how they can discuss their projects.
Yeah,
Okay.
one of the things I just want to mention, one of the reasons many of these projects were focused on because they are things we could hopefully can complete within that 2-year time frame. So certainly we could do planning related to groundwater spreading or surface water spreading, whatever. But I think we're not going to get a project done in 2 years, but certainly the planning piece of it.
No, the horizon on
certainly-
any project's 10 years, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But the planning could
But the
set the
planning
stage
could-
for asking for funding from other sources as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Chair, question.
Yes.
Based on the time frame from Devon, should we expect or should we preliminarily schedule an early October board meeting, because if we're looking at the time frame to get the final back, we're going to need to approve that final before it goes in.
Yeah, let's see what we can get together and what the final deadline turns out to be, and we can always call a special meeting to take care of that.
Yeah, the
I
state's
think
been
one
pretty
thing
good.
that has to be noted, though, I believe the requirement is that we have to have 10% matching funds, so we have to keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes, any public comments?
You're taking public comments on this?
Sure.
My name is Renee Roth, and I'm just jumping into this rather blind, but I've heard recently that a few wells are going dry in the Ojai Basin, and I don't know how much interaction the board has with wells that are going dry, but I know that's a big concern for people. And I'm wondering about, this may be happening more and more in the future, and that idea of having recharge projects and areas where we know we can do more recharge of groundwater into certain areas of the basin. Have those areas been defined? And for those areas that we know, there may be people who are going to be running out of water and having to tap into the more of the Casitas water, ways to help transition those users into more recharge and less reliance on Casitas water. I'm just wondering if there's any analysis on where those users might be, and they might be interested in volunteering to be selected for some demonstration projects, or those kinds of things. And I know Mr. Finch probably is closer to that community than anybody else. So I'm just wondering about the interaction with the users, the growers, if anybody's saying, can we do more for us to get us some more water? Go ahead. I'm sorry, that's it. Thank you.
Yeah, I think, wells do go dry. There's wells that have gone dry every year for decades and decades. And people are very aware of where they're at. It's not because of their location, it's because of their depth. Because once you're in the regular basin, not the Swazi, it's one basin, and I'm not the professional. The professional's to my right, so he can please correct me when I say something wrong. But the recharge projects, you hit something near and dear to me. I think there's opportunities because of what we have to do in farming to make sure our discharge is clean of sediment. There are opportunities for small ones, but the big one, unfortunately, the county spent roughly $2 million on and doesn't work. And I think that's the one thing in this that we've got to make sure. And I made a note to talk to Glenn Shepard at the county, because they own it. They spearheaded it, and it doesn't work. The old system worked for probably $20,000 a year, would be my guess. So yes, but it isn't. I wouldn't think of, this well went dry, so that's where it's dry. This well went dry because it's only 140 feet deep, and the well next door to it's doing great. So it's not an area as much as a well. And I think everybody, they know where the shallower wells are.
And wouldn't we say this was a routine cycle for the same wells at the same time, the same elevation, and they know this is going to happen because the straws don't reach down as far. And so all those people at different times are no longer drawing. And I take a look at it differently, and I hope I don't offend anybody. It's self-balancing. because you have less and less and less people drawing. And so you have less and less and less pressure on the aquifer as it gets lower. And so it's been going on 25 plus years I've been here.
Yeah, and that's part of the purpose for the Casitas project, so, was to support that.
Devin, could you just give some quick recaps of these projects? The reason being, we're going to be running out of time, and we still have several items on the agenda to get through.
Sure. I'll just I'll breeze through the rest of them, and then the board can take time to look at the.
Yeah, maybe you could just kind of go over this project list. I don't know if you can see that, but it was just a table of potential projects.
Yeah.
And
Can you see my current slide? I'm on the sampling and analysis plan.
Yeah.
Okay. So if it's all right with you, I'll continue going through these slides, and I'll go quickly.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So next project is the prepare sampling analysis plan. This would be a document that establishes the monitoring standards and procedures, and it would be used by whomever is doing the current monitoring and also future monitoring. So it would just ensure quality data that's defensible, and would be a document that produced by the OBGMA specific to their monitoring protocols, and ensure compliance with state monitoring protocols. Another project, the biggest project with an expanded scope, would be the groundwater dependent ecosystems assessment. The purpose of this project would be to fill some of those remaining data gaps related to groundwater surface water interactions, so that the information could be used to establish sustainable management criteria for interconnected surface water. At this time, there's not sufficient data, so this project, the focus would be to acquire all of that information so that those sustainable management criteria, minimum thresholds for groundwater levels and so forth, can be set. The study would include biological and hydrological surveys to map these ecosystems that have been identified, installation of stream gauges and wells, and then pumping tests too, to look at the connection between different aquifer zones. So looking at this slide here shows it's a map showing the basin. The red triangles are proposed locations for stream gauges. These in the perennial reach, it would be a more permanent gauge where monitoring has been occurring. And then in other areas where there's intermittent flows, they would be temporary gauges to record those storm events. And the idea is that the temporal resolution would be increased, would be improved from what has historically been collected, so that additional analysis can be completed. Also, the project proposes to drill a depth discrete monitoring well in the central part of the basin. It would be similar to the southwest well that was drilled recently, but provide a monitoring point for the central part of the basin outside of the southwest uppermost saturated zone. So this project is a big one, has a lot of details, and it would be great if the board could review the description in the agenda packet and provide input. Another project is simulate extreme climate scenarios, and the GSP climate scenarios were simulated, but this would be including the wetter, milder warming and drier extreme warming to really see what are the extremes moving forward that the basin could experience, and this would inform management in the future. So this would be using the model to predict the climate extremes of the future. As we've discussed, another project that's included in the GSP and potentially in this grant application would be to explore opportunity for focused recharge. This would be communicating with Ventura County Watershed Protection District to determine the feasibility of bringing the spreading grounds into operation. It's permitted for recharge of up to 914 acre feet a year. And this project would also look at other areas of the basin looking at land use, soils, other hydrogeologic conditions to see where stormwater could be captured and used for recharge. The developed comprehensive conjunctive management plan would be similar to what was included in the previous groundwater management plans, where it would be a storage and action table of sorts, whereas the levels in the lake levels in Casitas and Ojai Basin groundwater levels, the values, depending on what those stages are used to make certain management, carry out certain management actions and make certain decisions. So this would be just formalizing what has previously been in draft form and in the groundwater management plan and the GSP, and would involve discussions with Casitas and the OBGMA to develop this plan for managing both resources conjunctively. Another project would be to revise the numerical groundwater model. Currently, the model relies on a proprietary surface water model of Daniel B. Stevens and Associates. So in order to update that watershed model, it's required that Daniel B. Stevens and Associates make those updates. Also, the functionality of the current model, it's not able to really capture the dynamics of the Southwest upper saturated zone and some of the complexities of the basin. So this project would look at taking the existing model, using its the information that's already contained in the model, and expanding upon that, adding what the new data that's been collected on the Southwest uppermost saturated zone, and adding some functionality so that these different pumping scenarios and impacts to GDEs and surface water can all be modeled and calibrated using the data that's being collected and will be collected potentially from the GDE assessment. And then lastly, it's update the extraction metering program. Approximately 80 wells have been identified as not having meters or not reporting. It's unknown if these wells are no longer in use or so forth. So this project would be ensuring all those wells have meters, and could also include installation of advanced metering infrastructure on the 25 wells, which account for roughly 75% of basin pumping, so that those data are available real time and can really track basin conditions. So with that, that's a summary of the projects. 8 projects total with an amount of about 1.3 million. And again, these are described in the board agenda packet, and we can discuss at further meetings as more time will allow.
So you realize that your numbers don't link to the proposed project GSP spreadsheet versus the write-up.
Right, so I believe the slides that were included in the agenda packet are actually old draft slides from a meeting with John Mundy.
Yeah,
and,
I didn't get an updated presentation.
That's fine, just so long they need to tie out. My only comment, and it goes towards what we just spoke about, that anything on the recharge, we're not going to get away for less than 6 figures, and it's probably going to be, a couple $100,000 to even get it hopefully working right.
Yeah, right now the project's described as really just a feasibility study looking at opportunities.
So just the engineering part of it, basically, or is feasibility not even mean engineering?
Yeah, not even mean engineering. I think there's opportunity to apply for additional grant funds and to expand the scope of that. But right now it'd be more of a computer analysis and some meetings with the Ojai City and Ventura County Watershed Protection District to look at opportunities for recharge, not only at the spreading grounds, but in the portion of the basin overlain by the city of Ojai and other areas.
Well, I would think, I mean, there's already facilities there. We should,
Right.
you know, taking a look at how those could be re-engineered or modified.
Yeah, I think that one, it's not, I think you can probably, we probably ought to split that into two things. One, looking at other recharge potentials, and a specific line item for rehabilitation of the existing spreading grounds.
Yeah.
Probably two separate line items.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Excellent input.
And put this and more on the one line item and something else on the exploration line item. I don't know what, but.
I think we just ought to put you guys in charge of rehabilitating it. You could probably do it in a few weeks.
If you did it at night, it would.
Then maybe the board should ask the watershed in the county for them to go ahead and divert the funds to us.
But I agree, I think that should be two separate items, additional opportunities and then some type of re-engineering of the existing facilities. Any other comments? I had a public comment, sir. Did you still have a comment?
I think I can keep it for your next resolution.
Oh, okay.
Can I just make one question? Because I know this requires cooperation and coordination with Casitas. Casitas just, put out their report saying that 80% of the water for the Casitas system comes from groundwater, and the other 20% comes from Casitas. Not recently, it was in May, their state of their water supply and their water demand report that they made to the Casitas board back in May. They said they separated out the Casitas system for Ojai and showed how much water was coming from the Casitas system. 20% is coming from Casitas, and 80% is coming from the groundwater wells that are in the basin
That's
that
for the
Casitas is
city,
managing.
the city itself, the old Southern California Water Company system.
Right.
Not the entire valley.
Right. Not the entire valley. So I guess that's what I'm trying to do, is be able to get some kind of a, what's the state of the water system for the residents who are on that Ojai part of the system, so that people who are concerned about water supplies, water demands, rainfall, conservation, what's going to be expected of them, how do they get some good information and reliable information where you work with Casitas and with your groundwater basin? Since 80% is coming from the basin, how do we get good information out so the public can better understand what's happening in 80% of their water system? I think they don't get.
It's all interrelated. I mean, the fact is, if it doesn't rain for the next 3 years, we all have a problem. But it's unlikely that we'll get no rain. If we get some rain over the next 3 years, we have 3 to 5 years supply, and that includes the groundwater and includes the lake. I mean, it's used conjunctively. It isn't one source for one group and another source for another.
And I'm not trying to divide it. All I'm trying to do is consolidate it so people know. I have a lot of confidence in the groundwater system and the groundwater availability. I have lots of confidence in it, but a lot of people don't, because they see the lake and they say our water's coming from the lake, and we are in trouble, we have no water. There are people who are fomenting those kinds of discussions, and what
I would
I'm
say
trying to do is.
if you compare the two, we're about in the same position. The groundwater basin and the lake are pretty much in the same position.
Okay.
I mean, it hasn't rained significantly for the past several years, so the lake has 3 to 5 years to supply the entire district, and the groundwater basin, if it didn't rain at all, has an equal amount of water to supply the area it serves. The thing is that's being as pessimistic as you can possibly be.
Right.
The basin fills up rather rapidly when we get rain. The lake is a little slower, but the lake's a lot bigger. So we're all in the same boat here.
So I'm just trying to say, is there any way to consolidate and get public information out about the Ojai system?
The
So
Ojai
people-
system is related to all of the other systems in the Casitas district. We all use the water conjunctively. If the Ojai Basin were to run out of water, Casitas would supply it.
I think she's talking more about the messaging and there is no dashboard right
Yeah,
now.
there's
And,
no
you know,
dashboard.
maybe
Consolidated.
no one speedometer, tachometer, and, two speedometers, one for the lake and one for the
Yeah.
basin. We can see in these grants, somebody in there is a techno wizard, I'm sure. I think I understand what you're saying. I think we could.
A public information and outreach about the status of our water supplies, generically, high-level view,
Right.
I think would be helpful.
A simple dashboard.
Simple, high-level.
Well, Casitas has to do its status report in September, so a lot of that will come out of that information report.
Exactly.
The problem is it's not easy for Casitas to focus on one service area. It serves a large area. And the basin is just one part of that, so.
And for those residents who are in this area, they have very little information, and it's hard to figure out and extrapolate what is relevant to
Well, I
this
guess
area.
the easier way to look at it is we're all in the same boat here. There isn't a separate condition for the city of Ojai versus the condition of the rest of the Casitas Water District. We're all in the same. If one needs water, he'll get it from the other and vice versa. The benefit of the Ojai Basin is it fills up a little faster than Casitas, but Casitas has significantly more water. So
And we don't have the evaporation and the other things that actually deplete the water supply in Casitas either. So all I'm trying to say is, how can we get some good information out to the public about our water supplies? It's difficult to find, and it'd be nice if we had a place to go where we could find that, where you and Casitas are getting together and agreeing on what would be good information. Thank you.
As the representative for the Community Water Facility District, give me a call.
Okay. Thank you.
yes.
I thank you guys because you've turned me on to the groundwater sustainability plan. All that information's there. I think you have it, you've done it, it's detailed. And I just think if you just simplify it, maybe maybe in a little brochure or something so everyone understands it. But you've worked great, you have the details, you've done the work. It's there for everybody to read. I don't think people want to read 400 pages, but it's all there and very understandable. Just simplify for the community, a little brochure, and I thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, something along those lines that we've been thinking of for a long time is that one-stop website dashboard where there's a profile of Casitas and a profile of the basin. I should put it this way because we're higher elevation. And just the light blue goes up so high on one and up so high on the other, and it's updated monthly. Right. You know,
But
we can get a grant for that, right, Devin?
That's great.
Right, yeah, I think there's opportunity now to include some of that work and under this grant. So the data management system not only would be, a way to manage all the monitoring data, but also a way to communicate it to the public and stakeholders. And so I think it could definitely include a description of that in the grant application and potentially some updates to the OBGMA website to show some of this information that the public is asking for.
My name is Cameron Ransom, and I agree too. Keep it simple. Keep it really simple for people. They're going to understand it better. They don't want to read through 400 pages. It takes way too damn long. So if we could just have a little meter, one for the lake, one for the basin, whatever you want to do, that would be perfect. It could be something people could go to. They could pull it up on their phone, their tablet, their computer. That would be great.
Thank you.
I'd like to make a comment. we have some people that are interested in that. I would suggest you get a hold of the newspaper. We have a little indicator of how much rain, which is like 5 or 6 months old, and it hasn't moved. And we show a little bit of what's going on in the lake. They could change that, and we've got great graphs. And what we could put is the percentage, 49,000 acre feet of underground water, and we could put that in, and that's readily available on our website. So the paper could do it. Why don't you ask the paper if they do that feature, and they could just put the other little graph and show the other water supply. That'd be pretty simple.
Okay, anything else?
The only thing that worries me about this, I think, all of us just being here, it's geological time. Looking at even Jordan's monitors every 90 minutes. At some point, these things are, I objected to the quarterly statements versus semi-annual. Things don't move that fast in this. I think we want to know, what did it do this week? And it really isn't. It's a couple times a year it's significant, or maybe even, how it comes out of the spring, and you pretty much know at that point. So you have to think this is short geological time, but it's still geological time.
Yeah, I agree. That we do, the Groundwater Agency and Casitas do a report in the spring, and that's following the winter rainfall, whether we have it or not. And that report basically tells you what it's going to be like for the next summer and fall. And that's about as far as we can go. I mean, trying to say, exactly when are we going to run out of water, or it really doesn't work that way, because, as Jim said, things really move slowly. As low as that lake looks, there's a lot of water in it, and as much water as we, claim to have in the groundwater basin, we can't use all that water. So you can only pump that down so far. So, trying to put it into simple terms that this is the condition we're in and how long this is going to last, it's like, trying to tell the future. Really, the best gauge is to look at where we're at in April and May and how we're going to make it through to the next rainy period. That's about as far as we can project. And, what we're trying to do here and at Casitas is make sure that if we get accumulative dry years like that, we still have enough water to get through another one and hope for rain. But without rain, there's not much we can do. I mean, the reality of it is we could go a very, very long time and still provide water to keep, general services provided. I mean, it's, what we're trying to avoid is going to that drastic step where we have to, kill all the landscaping and wipe out all the agriculture. So, we're not there. There's still water, and there's still very high probability that in the next 3 years we'll get rain. So I would say in the spring is really the time to look. This is what we've got. This is the year we're going to look at. This last spring, we know it's very dry. We've asked for a lot of conservation. We've gotten a lot of conservation. And this coming spring, hopefully we'll have rain, and it may not be as tough, or it may be tougher. But until then, we really can't say what to expect between now and April or May of next year. Anything else? All right, thank you. Our next item, John?
Yes, we have and I'm going to ask our agency counsel, Peter, Mr. Candy, you still there?
Excuse me, I've had my hand raised for 15 minutes.
Oh.
I wanted to talk about the dry well thing that was mentioned earlier. I apologize for interrupting.
You got a
Oh,
comment?
go ahead.
Yeah,
yeah.
go ahead.
Sorry, thank you. Sorry for interrupting. So there was a comment made earlier about dry wells. My name is Kevin Delano. I'm a geologist at the State Water Board. The state takes reports of dry wells quite seriously, especially if there's a risk to loss of drinking water. So I just wanted to let folks know that there are several resources available for folks that are at risk of losing drinking water from dry wells, or if their well goes dry and they don't have any more drinking water. there's state resources, but the first thing that folks should do is contact, in Ventura County, it's Ventura County Sheriff's Office of Emergency Services. But then beyond that, there's quite a few services available for like bottled water, well deepening, things like that. And some of those services like well deepening also exist for non-domestic wells too. So I just wanted to plug that. Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right, thank you.
Kevin Delano.
Ready? I'd like to have district or agency council give a review on this draft resolution. And the reason I'd like to focus on this, at least for the rest of the meeting, is because we do have some folks that are waiting for wells to be approved. They're looking for permits. This is important. I'm going to recommend that the budget and the 5-year projection and the metering requirements letter be brought back at the next meeting, because we're not going to get to this today. And we don't need to adopt a budget until next month anyways. So, Peter, you have any comments on the draft resolution?
Sure. Thank you, John. I'll just introduce it. Peter Candy, Agency Counsel. I was asked to prepare a template of a proposed resolution. This came up at the last meeting in the context of Senior Canyon Mutual Water Company's well application. I wasn't present at that meeting, but I understand that there is some discussion around possibility of pulling together a template for a board resolution to approve, or I rather, but the template is put together for well approvals that meet the agency's criteria for well approvals. And there's different criteria depending on the well, the location of the well, and the characteristics of the well that may come up. And so what's included in your board packet is the template that I pulled together. It addresses the different scenarios that potentially may come up. It's sort of a pick and choose menu that the agency could use. For instance, if we're talking about a public water system and it's a well that would serve the public water system exclusively, and that system meets the criteria set out in the health and safety code, then you'd select, for instance, item 1. That means that effectively that an exemption would apply to the governor's executive order and the criteria set forth in that executive order. So you could choose item 1 and do away with some of these other items and move down to items 6, 7, and 8. And you could adapt each one of these resolutions to the different circumstances of the particular well approval, and move forward on that basis and approve it and have a resolution in place. Now, I understand that Jordan has prepared a slide deck to present to talk about the different decision-making tree that goes into these well approvals. The resolution I prepared just addresses the approval itself and the findings that the board would make with respect to the approval. But I believe Jordan has a slide deck to present to the board that would talk about, it's intended to educate the board on the decisional tree that the board might go through in determining whether or not to approve a well. And Jordan, if I haven't explained that accurately, please jump in.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. I think you did explain it pretty well, and my goal / intention of preparing the slide deck is to put what you just very eloquently described in a graphical format, sort of a flow chart. So let me share the screen here and go through that quickly. We've got the permitting flow chart, we call it. And of course, this stems from the governor's executive order N722 and SGMA and such. a lot of which is a result of the drought issues, but it also has issues of helping fish habitat and recharge projects that cut through a lot of red tape. The bigger one is what we read is that you can't just issue a well permit the way you used to. If you're in the basin, if you're in a high priority or medium priority basin under SGMA, you got to make sure that it's completely sustainable and in keeping with the GSP, not likely to interfere, not likely to cause subsidence, things of that nature. A lot of exemptions to that. The county itself had a response that effectively echoed the executive order, but really focused on the two items that have been further distilled into the resolution. So the OBGMA permitting response is as such. We're a local permitting agency, exclusive GSA of the Ojai Basin, have had a no-fee permit in place for a long time, and it's always been ministerial in action. But it raises some questions under this executive order. Is it ministerial? Is it discretionary? How much evaluation of resources needs to be done? Who's going to take a look that it's compliant with the GSP? And of course, CEQA. So the answers were, let's create a flow chart that, and or resolution here that kind of expresses all of this in a way that makes sense. So we start with a permit application is filed. The first question is this well site within the OBGMA jurisdiction? If the answer is no, get thee to the county and get yourself a permit. If the answer is yes, okay, is the well site within the GSA jurisdiction? And that's an important distinction. A lot of people understand the OBGMA, it's the basin, it's one and the same. Well, in fact, the Ojai Basin Groundwater Management Agency was formed 30 plus years ago with a boundary that was not exactly that of the alluvial portion of the basin. The alluvial portion of the basin was better defined under Bulletin 118 in 2016 that led to that which is the Groundwater Sustainability Agency boundaries. The amoeba within the Petri dish. The Petri dish being the OBGMA jurisdiction, the amoeba being the GSA jurisdiction. If you're between the two, is well site within GSA jurisdiction? No. The OBGMA can issue a permit and be completely exempt from this executive order and its sequential issues. And again, direct the applicant to the county. If the answer is yes, and it is within the GSA jurisdiction, the big question is the well proposed to extract alluvial groundwater? There are a lot of wells within the mapped portion of the amoeba that go through the amoeba to the Petri dish and get, I keep using those analogies. If you know me, you know that's how things come. But if they're going through the amoeba into the Petri dish, if you're going through the sand through the alluvium into the bedrock, you're not extracting alluvial groundwater. And therefore that would likely be exempt from this order as well. So if the answer is no, issue the OBGMA permit and direct the applicant to the county. If the answer is yes, we've got alluvial groundwater extraction. So, is the well for a public agency? The answer is yes, that's also exempt per this order. Issue the permit and direct the applicant to the county. If the answer is no, not for a public agency, the next question is, this alluvial well, is it proposed for domestic use of less than 2 acre-feet per year? If the answer is yes, it's also exempt. Issue the OBGMA permit and direct applicant to the county. You see the color coding here is green. Let's get this done. And up until this point, we're really going through what is the ministerial process that the OBGMA has done since the original well permit resolution went into place. So then the question is, will the well extraction, if it's no, if it's more than 2 acre-feet per year and it's in the alluvial portion of the basin, will that well extraction cause undesirable results? And that's the $50,000 question. And here's where it could keep discretionary. You got an alluvial, private, greater than 2 acre-foot per year extraction, doesn't meet any of the other exemption requirements. Will the well interfere with the function of other nearby wells? And how much interference is negative? How much what is the time duration? Santa Barbara County went through this and established a 5 foot of drawdown on a neighboring well within 1,000 feet over 1 year of pumping. If you can demonstrate that you're going to be 4.25 feet, you're exempt. Something similar would have to be done at this agency. If the answer is yes, it will interfere. That could be grounds to deny that permit. Take some noodle time. If the answer is no, will the well induce undesirable results? Will it cause subsidence? Will it cause a nearby creek to dry up? Will it have some negative effect on water quality or start extracting salt water or be a conduit for this sort of thing? The answer is yes. Potentially deny the permit. Again, requires some noodle time. These maybes are going to require noodle time, which is of course an expense. But if no, we can establish that it's not going to induce undesirable results, not going to interfere with the wells, not going to cause subsidence. Issue that permit with the conditions as are presented in this draft resolution that will ensure that there are no undesirable results and potentially limits on the pumping. So, what are the next steps? Take a look at this draft resolution, modify the permit application, establish some fees for permits that require that additional effort. Fortunately, between DUDEC and Care Groundwater, there are two licensed hydrogeologists that are under the consulting agreement with the OBGMA. So if one of us is conflicted out because we're working for an applicant, the other can take a look at this while the other recuses himself. I think that's a good thing and speaks to a lot of the collaborative efforts that we have. But again, it's all about these standard conditions and making sure that it's a consistent process for evaluation of each individual permit. And for my way of thinking, those that are clearly exempt through this, through that potentially discretionary issue, should be approved as we've discussed in this flow chart. So, and thank you for that, your attention during this graphic example.
I'd like to add just a couple of quick comments. Thank you. That was great, Jordan. Within the resolution, you'll see items 4 and 5, and I think those are significant issues that have to be addressed. And 4 is determine the extraction of groundwater from proposed wells not likely to interfere, as Gordon, with the production and function of existing wells and not likely to cause subsidence. Who's going to do that work? Okay, so that's another component of some of the next steps. We've got to figure out how's that going to get done. And is that going to be on the potential well owner to provide that report, or does OBGMA do that? And then the second one is the groundwater extraction by the proposed well is not inconsistent with the groundwater sustainability plan adopted by the basin. So, who's going to do that work and how does that get done? So I don't see these well permits being approved quickly anytime soon and even in the future. I think it's going to take an effort on this agency's part as well as the well owners that submit their applications.
Jim?
2 comments.
John, I would just add to that, appreciate those comments that, yeah, that's true unless, as Jordan points out, you meet the qualifications for exemption, right? If you can show that you're outside of the DWR boundaries, but within OBGMA's jurisdiction, you're not going to be drawing from the alluvial portion of the basin. You're not going to have an impact on surrounding wells because there's no wells, anywhere near you. So on and so forth. You meet these criteria, then you can get approved pretty easily, and very ministerial process. And I think it needs, those are the types of applications that we would invite to come forward, right? Those are the sort of the no-brainers. It's the ones that require some thought that we're going to need to adjust this process for. We're going to need to figure out, what is the fee that these folks pay to offset the costs of this analysis. We're going to need to, decide those types of issues. So I just wanted to make that clarification. Thanks.
It goes to both. Well, I thought there was one further exemption for near a existing well for a replacement in the governor's thing. Peter, or?
Yeah, I don't know. We'll have to look into that.
Okay, because that was an interpretation I got out of another groundwater agency, and I'm going through this process right now in another groundwater agency. I have to hire the geologist and pay for that, and then they review it. But, there's a lot of places in Ventura County where subsidence is not an issue, and distance to wells, the impact is there. So it's not that difficult of a decision often, given our circumstances here. And in this basin, especially the one, we actually had whatever the opposite of subsidence is. The study showed increases. So it goes to that neighboring well, and in some cases, you are the neighboring well.
Any other comments? Yes.
Afternoon, everybody. Thanks for your service. My name is Andrew Stassi, and I have a client who's actually had a well permit for 4 years, a little over 4 years from the Groundwater Management Agency, but he could not obviously drill his well because of the moratorium. And since the moratorium sunset in the county, he can now drill a well 2 acre-feet or less, is my understanding, because there is no sunset clause in the well permit that he received from the Groundwater Management Agency. Now, that being said, I'm just curious, is it incumbent on the Groundwater Management Agency to receive this report? I was reading the county requirements regarding the information that they wanted submitted, and their requirements just appear to suggest, anyway, in item 2, that the consultation with the Groundwater Sustainability Agency will basically just state that this will not be in conflict with your plan. But I'm curious if the report regarding subsidence or pumping more than 2 acre-feet actually has to go to the Groundwater Management Agency or the county.
I think the issues of sustainability have to go to us. So if it was a subsidence issue,
Yeah, but if they, say that it's going to be 2 acre-feet or less,
exempt,
it's
so-
exempt.
Well, it's ministerial at that
Yeah.
point, and it's
Yeah.
exempt.
So,
but-
I mean, we might just have that same checkoff box that you came here, it said 2 acre, and
yeah.
to Jordan's thing, go back to the county.
Right, but if you read the county's requirement, they're basically just saying that the proposed well will not be inconsistent with any sustainable groundwater management program. And they seem to be asking for the geologist report regarding the other issues. That may not be the case. But.
And it might be, I mean, we're in whole new territory, and
Mm-hmm.
the reason I'm chiming up is because I just talked to Jeff Dorrington, and he steered me in, not for this basin, but it sounds like, and I agree with Jordan's flow chart, that when you're under that 2 acre-feet, it's back over there, and whether we have to check a box, because then I think you're out of those other requirements also.
That's correct.
Yeah.
The permit evaluation by the PG, CHG, or PE, and the consultation with the GSA, verbatim from the county's ordinance modification, these requirements do not apply to wells that pump less than 2 acre-feet per year for individual domestic users.
But the jurisdiction would require the metering still.
Oh, yes, yes.
So it would have to be
permit
metered.
from the OBGMA.
Correct, but I'm curious, the question is it incumbent on the management agency, the groundwater management agency, to actually be the receiver of the engineering regarding more than 2 acre-feet, or is that incumbent on the county to review that and receive it and approve it?
I think I can help if you're interested in hearing from me. These requirements, the source of these requirements are the governor's executive order. And if you look at the language of the executive order, it's a prohibition on any agency, any local agency, city, county, local agency, OBGMA, you can't issue a permit. So OBGMA wouldn't be able to issue its permit without reviewing the information. And then the county wouldn't be able to issue its permit without reviewing the information. So I'd say both in this circumstance. Let's say the 2 acre-foot exemption doesn't apply, and you need to jump through this particular hoop with a qualified professional to render an opinion on these matters. You need to submit that both to OBGMA. They need to review it, as well as the county. They would need to review it. That would be my response based on a reading of the governor's executive order.
Fair enough. We're obviously looking for a workaround in timeframes. I'm listening to what you're saying, that possibly no time soon. My next question would be since my client has a permit already but it's not restricted to 2 acre-feet or more, is this retroactive to his permit because he already has a permit? And secondly, if it is, and he pulls his permit to drill 2 acre-feet, and he wants to supply this information post installing the well to increase the acre footage, can he do that?
I don't think we're ready to answer that. I think we need to talk.
Okay. These are questions that obviously are applicable and important, because when you have a guy that's been waiting for a permit for 4 years, or has been waiting to drill a well for 4 years,
Sure.
it's a pretty critical path. It's a critical path to how he spends his money, improves his property. So my next question is realistic. What's a ballpark, realistic time frame to put this on the agenda and create some resolution to the answers, because I think that's probably what people are looking for realistically.
Well, I think a review of your existing application and then some specifics on what you are really trying to achieve, whether it's 2 acre-feet or less, or you want more than that.
He wants more than 2 acre-feet.
Yeah,
He
well
has a
then-
permit, but it's not restricted to 2 acre-feet. So the question is, if you are my understanding was the county was going to be the agency that would absorb the additional engineering. If you're the agency that's going to pass it on to the county, it would probably be incumbent on you to say, hey, look, he had his permit, there was no restrictions. Can he move forward with more than 2 acre-feet, regardless of the engineering?
Yeah, like I said, I don't think we're ready to answer that question.
Come on
but
now.
We can help,
It's only 4:45. All right.
We got to get out of here.
We don't need an application, we already have a permit.
But a building permit, that's all, you gotta get going in 6 months or it defunct.
Mike, and I won't take too much of your time, I know you want to get out of here, but the problem is that the county had suggested, I can't remember Jeff, I think, at the county, had suggested that you could not, he talked to county council and suggested that in his opinion, you may not be able to go back after the fact and increase the acre footage after you got a permit for 2 acre-feet.
Well, and I think we need to look at the permit. And if it says 2 acre-feet or less, that's one issue. And may be able to move forward fairly quickly. However, if the property owner wants to increase that, then I think he's going to put himself in
that's
this
a whole
whole
other issue.
major process.
Currently, the permit does not say 2 acres. It doesn't say anything about the acre footage.
Okay. Well, and that's what we have to address, I think, in order to get through this.
So the question the client's going to have, what's the process for addressing this administratively?
Well, I think if you submit the documents you have and just a simple request on what you want us to review, and then we can go from there.
Would that be something that would be an agenda item or administrative?
Well, not yet. It would be an administrative thing. If you can submit it to John Mundy.
Yeah, let us take a look at that. If there's a lot of questions, then I'll talk with the agency counsel, and I guess the concern I have, if there's no acre footage established within that permit, I think it puts us in a little bit of limbo, and I'm not sure where we go.
Something on the application.
Yeah, there should have been, and typically I thought we've had those before.
Here's the good news. We did do the engineering. So that engineering is available. To my knowledge, there was no limit, however, on the acre footage.
Because the permit may not say there's 2 acre feet, but the application may, yeah.
Yeah, I bet the application.
Well, we'll take a look. I appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you.
Sure.
And, we can at least bring it back for discussion next meeting.
Yeah, well, you have better understanding of exactly what it is. Do you need any action on this resolution, or is this just for draft for now?
No, I think it's just draft right now. We got a lot more homework to do before we get this.
Do we need
process.
to move to continue the rest of the items?
You have another comment?
Hi, my name is Michael Grasso. For those of you that don't know me, I'm a C-57 well contractor here in the Ojai Valley. And my questions are related to Mr. Stasi's questions and unrelated. We filed application for a client of mine about 2 months ago. She's within the OBGMA basin, but outside of the GSA. And her application specifically stated less than 2 acre feet. She's using this water for domestic purposes only. She's been subsisting off of a spring-fed water source for about 100 years on the property. Not her personally, but the property. And that item was agended, I believe, last month and passed over or not addressed, or maybe struck from the agenda. I wasn't here at the meeting. It was not agended. We're wondering, this is a person who is flushing her toilets with a 5-gallon bucket, and she's wondering what she has to do to get this application addressed.
Well, I think with some of the criteria we've outlined here, it makes it easier for us. So, again, if you contact John and we can see if we can expedite that.
We'll take a look at that as well and see if we can, if it's under 2 acre feet and
Yeah.
through the exemption process, we should be able to work on that pretty quick.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be excellent. She would have liked to have been here to address you herself. She feared a COVID, being exposed to COVID, so she's not here. But it'll be good to be able to tell her that. So thank you very much.
Anything else? That it for today? Okay, we'll adjourn at 4:42.
Chair, before we adjourn, I think Director Weir had a good point that we might want to be continuing the items that were taken up to the next.
Yeah, so I'll move to continue.
Second.
Verbal approval?
Everybody's in favor.
Yeah, we're in favor.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, John.